New York never slept. The vibrant lights from the billboards illuminated the busy streets, reflecting on the wet asphalt from the light rain that had fallen earlier. The sound of cars, horns, and hurried conversations blended with the city's pulsating rhythm, creating a chaotic yet captivating symphony. Inside a black SUV with tinted windows, Taylor Swift watched the night landscape unfold like a movie before her eyes. The towering buildings, the gleaming store windows, the hurried pedestrians. New York was like an old friend, yet always surprising. She was on her way to an important event, just another in the long sequence of engagements that shaped her. Routine, the flawless dress, the meticulously applied makeup, the subtle shine of her jewelry. Everything was in place, and still a strange feeling lingered in the air. As the car advanced through the illuminated streets, Taylor allowed herself to be carried away by her thoughts. Her mind drifted between the past and the present, revisiting the girl with golden curls and cowboy boots who, years ago, dreamed of conquering the music world. The journey to this point had been long, filled with extraordinary achievements, but also with challenges and new beginnings. Suddenly, a familiar melody filled the silent space of the car. Taylor blinked, snapping out of her reverie. The song playing on the radio was an old tune, one of those she used to listen to in her teenage years when she spent hours writing verses on the floor of her room, with a guitar in her arms and a heart full of dreams. She leaned slightly forward, turning up the volume. The chords were simple yet heavy with nostalgia. There was something in that sound that transported her to another time, another place. It was as if, for a moment, the successful, world-renowned woman disappeared, giving way to the 15-year-old girl writing about first love, the uncertainties of youth, and hope for the future. A small smile formed on her lips. That night, in the heart of New York, something inside her stirred. The car smoothly glided to a stop at a traffic light. Outside, the streets of New York remained alive. People hurried across the avenue, some laughing with friends, others focused on their own concerns. The lights from the billboards flickered, reflecting in the puddles that still shimmered under the city's illumination. Taylor rested her gaze on the window, still immersed in the nostalgia the song on the radio had sparked moments earlier. That's when something caught her attention. On the corner of the sidewalk, a weary-looking man held a battered guitar. His worn clothes and the small paper cup in front of him suggested that he had been there for a while, hoping some passers-by would drop a few coins. But it wasn't this that made Taylor's heart race. It was the melody. Even muffled by the noise of the city, she would recognize it anywhere. Her eyes widened. That was an old song, one she hadn't heard in years, a song that wasn't on any of her albums, but had once meant so much to her. Taylor leaned forward, trying to see better. Her heart was now beating faster, a mix of surprise and emotion overtaking her. "Pull over here," she said to the driver, not taking her eyes off the scene. The car slowly moved out of traffic and parked near the sidewalk. Before anyone could ask, she was already opening the door and stepping out onto the street. The cold night air hit her skin, but Taylor barely noticed. Her boots echoed on the wet asphalt as she approached the sidewalk, her mind spinning with questions. Who was that man? How did he know that song? As she got closer, she studied the street musician more carefully. His face, marked by time and the hardships of life, had something familiar about it. His hair, now messier, was a dark brown she vaguely recognized. And then, as if struck by lightning, the memory came. She knew that man. Years ago he had also held a guitar, but back then he wasn't on the streets. He didn't need coins. He was backstage at a small studio, encouraging her to keep composing, helping her turn loose scribbles into real songs. Taylor held her breath. "It can't be," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. The man continued to play, absorbed in the melody, his eyes downcast as if he were in another world. He hadn't noticed her yet, But Taylor knew. She had just reunited with someone who, in some way, was tied to her past, and nothing could have prepared her heart for that moment. The sound of the guitar filled the cold night air, weaving together with the distant horns and the endless hum of the city. Taylor felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something about that melody that felt too close, as if it belonged to a part of her that had been dormant. She took a few more steps forward, hesitant. The yellow light from the street lamp illuminated the man's face. He plucked the strings with precision, but there was a weight to his movements, a melancholy hidden within the chords. Taylor observed him carefully. His face was marked by the passage of time, the features hardened by life. The scruffy beard, the greying hair, and the lost look in his eyes contrasted with the lightness of his music, but there was something there, something that made her heart race. She furrowed her brow. Where did she know this man from? For a moment, he kept his head down, focused on the guitar. Then, as if he sensed the weight of her gaze, he lifted his head. Their eyes met. Time seemed to stop. That expression, those eyes. Taylor felt a lump in her throat. A wave of recognition hit her suddenly, as if an invisible puzzle piece had clicked into place in her mind. It was impossible, but it was real. She opened her mouth, trying to form words, but only a whisper escaped. You. The man blinked a few times as if trying to wake from a dream. His gaze wavered for a moment before fixing on her again. Taylor felt her chest tighten. He had recognized her too. The city continued around them, the cars passing by, people walking, the sounds and lights filling the night. But in that moment, nothing else existed, only the soft sound of the guitar strings and a reunion neither of them had expected. Time seemed to have stopped for a moment. Taylor watched the older man, his face marked by the weight of the years, and felt a strange sense of recognition. It was impossible to deny the familiarity in his eyes, yet he was so different, almost unrecognizable. The city of New York continued to bustle around them, but there, on that corner, in front of the man with his guitar, everything seemed to slow down. As Taylor's mind began to search for the connections, it was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of memories. It was a warm summer afternoon many years ago in a simple and modest classroom. She was still a teenager, only 14, with an insatiable passion for music. Back then, she would spend hours trying to master the guitar, struggling with the frustration of not being able to keep up with the songs she heard. The strings stubbornly refused to sound the way she imagined. It was in this setting that the man now staring at her with his tired eyes entered her life. He wasn't just a music teacher. He was someone who saw something in her that she couldn't even recognize in herself. When everyone around her doubted her ability to create, he believed. He believed in the lyrics she wrote, believed in the melody that emerged from her trembling hands. He guided her with patience, encouraging her not to give up. At that moment, he was the only person who made her believe that music could be more than just a hobby. It could be her future. He would always remind her that her words had something unique. "You will be great," he would say, with a confidence that Taylor had never felt about herself. It was his faith in her that pushed her to keep going, even when insecurity took over. During those afternoons, he taught her more than just chords and scales. He taught her to believe in her own talent. But now, looking at him, something was out of place. The man who once believed in her potential seemed to have lost his way somewhere along the path. His face was weary, his shoulders slumped, and the life he led on the streets wasn't the image of the mentor she had remembered so fondly. The guitar was still there, but now it seemed to be more a reflection of the silent struggle he was facing, trying to hold onto a part of himself, of what he had once believed in. She felt powerless in the face of the change that had occurred within him. The man who had once made her believe she could be more than just a girl with a guitar was now standing before her in a state she couldn't fully understand. The pain and suffering of his scars were evident, but more than that, the spark in his eyes seemed to have faded. The past, with all its promises and inspirations, seemed to have given way to an unrelenting reality. Taylor, no matter how hard, she tried to find explanations, felt lost in the face of so much transformation. What had happened to the man who had encouraged her to follow her dreams, who had made her believe in the impossible? She wondered, but no answer came. The weight of the moment hung in the air, and she knew that life wasn't just made of successes and achievements. Sometimes a person's journey takes unexpected turns, and all that's left are the memories of a time when the future seemed full of promise. Taylor felt a mix of sadness and gratitude for this man, gratitude for what he had done for her, but a deep sadness for seeing how life had treated him. At that moment, the city around Taylor seemed distant. The sound of the guitar was the only thing that truly touched her soul. She knew she needed to understand what had happened and what she could do to help, but the words seemed insufficient. Taylor remained silent, feeling the weight of the words that were about to be spoken. The man she recognized, the mentor who had once offered her trust and advice, now seemed distant. It was as if time had stretched, causing him to lose himself in the tides of life. He adjusted his position on the park bench, running his fingers along the worn wood of the guitar before finally beginning to speak. "Do you remember when you first started, don't you?" he said in a raspy voice, almost a whisper. Taylor nodded, her emotions taking over as he began to share his story. "After you became famous, everything changed. People started looking at me differently. As if I had just been a chapter in your life, something left behind." He paused for a moment, staring at the ground, perhaps trying to organize his thoughts or regain control of his emotions. His breathing grew heavier. "The music you made, the music we made, took you to places I never imagined. But while your career soared, my life was falling apart. I lost everything, Taylor. My home, my job, my dignity. I didn't know how to handle it. The pressure of seeing someone I believed in so much reaching their dreams while I kept falling further behind was more than I could bear." Taylor felt a deep pain, a mix of sadness and guilt. He had been such an important part of her journey, and she knew that without him, her path would not have been the same. But she hadn't known that after all this, he would fall so deeply. He continued now with his eyes lowered, strumming the guitar strings as if that was the only way to find some relief. "When the pressure mounted and things got tough, I started making the wrong decisions. The debts piled up, the stress consumed me, and the people I thought were friends began to drift away. Without a place to call home, without knowing who to turn to, I fell, ended up on the streets, alone, with no one." The sound of the guitar abruptly stopped, and he looked up at the night sky, his eyes fixed on some distant point, as if searching for answers that would not come. The silence that hung between them was heavy. Taylor felt the tear that slipped from her eye, but she couldn't look away from him. He was the man who helped her write her first songs, the man who saw in her a talent she couldn't even recognize, in herself. And now he was before her, broken by life. "You grew up, Taylor," he said, with a touch of sadness in his voice. "And I was left behind, forgotten. When the world saw you shine, I disappeared into the shadows. And with that, I lost myself. And all that remains is the memory of what I once believed was possible, but now seems so distant." Taylor tried to speak, but the words didn't seem to make sense. She wanted to say that she was sorry, that she wished she had done more to help, but what she truly felt could not be put into words. He had been her teacher, her mentor. But now he was there, before her, a reflection of what could have been. If life had been kinder, tears formed in her eyes, and she finally said, "I never forgot what you did for me. You taught me to believe in myself, and that will never be forgotten. I just didn't know what happened to you." He looked at her, a small sad smile forming on his lips, as if he had finally realized that, despite everything he had lost, there was still something there, a connection, a memory that had stood the test of time. "I know, Taylor," he replied softly. "I know." The sound of the guitar filled the space once again, but now it was a different melody. It was a melody that spoke of struggles, of losses, and of broken hopes, but at the same time there was a beauty in the melody that seemed to resist, as if, even amid the pain, there was something still pure in what he was doing. Taylor watched. The man before her, her lost mentor, and couldn't help but feel a deep gratitude, not only for what he had done for her, but for everything he still represented. The memories of their lessons, their conversations about music and life were still alive in her heart, and, in that moment, she knew she couldn't let him be lost again. She would do whatever it took to help him, just as he had done for her. Taylor moved back a bit, trying to process the man's words. The sound of the guitar still filled the air, but now, to her, it seemed distant, as if the music could not relieve the growing weight in her chest. She looked at that weathered face, marked by life's hardships, and thought about how, for so long, he had been a solid presence in her journey, the man who believed in her when no one else did. But now, it seemed as though the world had swallowed him up, and she felt that somehow she hadn't done enough. She looked around, the city lights seeming more distant than ever. New York, the city that had witnessed her rise, now felt like a metaphor for the abyss that was forming inside her. She had always known that fame brought challenges, but she had never imagined that something like this could happen. She thought about all the times he had encouraged her to keep going, to believe in her music, to follow her dreams. He had asked for nothing in return, except for her to follow her passion, and she did. She became the star he had always believed she could be, but as she looked at him now, guilt consumed her. Could she have done more? Could she have reached out and offered something in return when she reached the top? She had been so absorbed in the whirlwind of fame, in the commitments, and in the need to maintain her image and career that perhaps she hadn't given enough attention to those who had helped her get there. "I could have done something," she thought, as she watched his fingers lightly touch the strings, with a delicacy that now seemed faded, almost like a memory of what he could have been, of what he could have become. But at the same time, she knew that he had never asked her for anything. He believed in her music, in her talent, but always let her follow her path. He inspired her to be who she was, but never overwhelmed her with expectations. The tension in Taylor's heart grew as she wondered what she could do now. He was there, a person who had helped her find her voice, but now life had crushed him in a way she never could have imagined. She looked at him again, seeing the man she had always considered a mentor. And the truth became clear. She could not change what had happened. She couldn't go back in time, but there was something she could do. A small action, a decision, a movement that might help restore what seemed lost. She felt the conflict take over her, her career, her responsibilities, her limitations. But at the same time, a part of her knew that if she didn't try, if she didn't offer something now, she would carry that guilt, that feeling of leaving something incomplete. He had always believed in her. Now, perhaps it was her turn to believe. In him again. Taylor looked at the man before her, and in that moment she made a silent promise to herself. No matter how difficult or risky it was, she would not let that chapter in her life be just a distant memory. She would do whatever it took to help, even if it was a small gesture. The music she wrote was not limited to stages and albums. She knew that the true power of music was to transform lives, and she was ready to do that again. The tension in the air was palpable. Taylor felt that words still weren't enough to ease the pain the man before her carried. He looked at her with distrust, as if he didn't believe what she was offering. Perhaps, somewhere, he had gotten used to thinking that no one else cared, that his struggle was his own and no one else's. But Taylor couldn't just turn her back. Not after all he had done for her. She knew she couldn't change the past. But now, with the future ahead, she had the chance to do something, an opportunity to repay the help he had given her so many times when she was starting her journey. Taylor took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to make a proposal she knew could change the course of their story. "Come with me," she said, firmer than she felt. "I want to help you. Let's go to a hotel, a comfortable place where you can rest, think, and maybe start again. You don't have to stay here." He hesitated. The disbelief on his face was clear. He didn't want to seem weak, nor dependent on anyone. Perhaps it was hard for him to accept the idea that someone, especially Taylor Swift, wanted to help him. Life on the streets had made him a man of suspicion, and all this kindness seemed unreal. "I can't accept," he murmured, trying to step back. I'm not the same anymore. Things have changed too much." But Taylor didn't back down. She moved closer to him, remaining calm, looking him in the eyes. "I understand that you may have doubts, but you don't have to do this alone. Just let me help you, even if it's a small step. Just a little comfort, just for a while." The man remained silent for a moment, his expression wavering between resistance and acceptance. He looked at her, and something in his eyes finally gave way. With a resigned sigh, he gave a slight nod. "Okay, I'll go with you." The feeling of relief was immediate. Taylor smiled with a mixture of satisfaction and expectation. It was a small gesture, but it signified the beginning of something larger. They headed toward the car, their journey now filled with possibilities, and with it renewed hope. She knew she couldn't fix all the mistakes of the past, but there was a chance for both of them to start over. With the man by her side, Taylor felt for the first time that night that she was doing the right thing. Upon arriving at the hotel, Taylor guided the man to the lobby. The place was comfortable, but not extravagant, a deliberate choice to make him feel at ease. After ensuring he was settled, Taylor made a quick call to her team. Her heart was tight, but she knew the decision was made. She wasn't going to stop until she helped him in the best way possible. In the hotel conference room, with the team gathered, she explained the situation. "We need to find a way to help him rise again. It can't just be temporary help. He needs ongoing support, someone who understands what he's going through." The team listened attentively, already accustomed to Taylor's dedication to bigger causes. A specialist in rehabilitation and social reintegration was immediately contacted, someone with experience in dealing with people who had been in extreme situations like him. The idea was to give him a real chance, something beyond just an act of charity. "We'll do everything we can to give him a real chance to change his life. A new beginning," Taylor said confidently, her tone deciding the direction she wanted to take. She knew this support would be crucial, but she also understood that in the end, the desire to start over would have to come from him. Meanwhile, in the hotel room, the man sat in silence, processing everything that was happening. He stared out, the window lost in thought, but a small spark of hope began to shine within him. The chance to start over was there, right in front of him. A new beginning, something he thought was impossible. Months passed since that encounter on the street in New York. The man, now healthier and revitalized, was returning to doing what he had always loved, playing music. The transformation was visible not only in his appearance, but also in his energy. He was reconnecting with his passion and slowly regaining the confidence he had lost over the years. Taylor visited him frequently, tracking his progress and celebrating every small victory. Together, they revisited the past and the music he had always loved. With each note played, she felt that something deeper was happening, as if the melody wasn't just a form of expression, but also a form of healing. On a quiet afternoon, after another day of rehearsals, Taylor sat down at her piano. The notes flowed as though they had always been written, and soon a new song was being born. It was about them, about the power of second chances, about how fate can bend when we least expect it. He taught me so much, and I helped him find his strength again. That's what really matters, Taylor thought as she wrote the lyrics. It was a song of gratitude, of transformation, and above all, of a new beginning. She knew that meeting had been more than just a coincidence. The message was clear. The small connections, the ones that seem fleeting, can change lives. Her life, just like his, would never be the same. The new beginning wasn't just for him, it was also for her. A reminder that gratitude and the ability to help can transform everything around us.